Hello, BIO178. Welcome to our local adaptation module. And not to be biased, but this is one of my favorite topics. This is what I actually studied for my entire dissertation and my PhD. So hopefully you will enjoy this module as much as I do. So just like we always do, I wanted to start with an example of how this topic relates to things you might be seeing in the news or things that you might see in your everyday lives. This is a paper, the citation's down here in the bottom right, and in this particular paper, they were looking at the effect of climate change on some wild and cultivated maize species, and they were looking at specifically how climate change interacts with this topic of local adaptation. So we'll talk more later in this module, of course, about what local adaptation is. But the idea is that these different wild teosinte species of maize in Mexico experience different temperatures across the different sites where they exist in Mexico. This picture here on the right, for reference, these are the wild species, and then this is the cultivated maize for reference, so the one that's grown that people eat, for instance. And what they found in this paper is that for the wild populations, because these different populations are specifically adapted to living in these different temperature climates, climate change, which is changing these temperatures, is going to have a differential effect on these populations. So some of them are going to be more affected than others. And the implication for that is if we're finding this effect in the wild maize species, this also indicates that for a lot of the cultivated species, climate change may actually result in a lot of these cultivated species becoming maladapted to the climates in which they're currently grown. In other words, because of local adaptation combined with this aspect of climate change, the places where we're currently growing cultivated maize might not work anymore. So this is an example of a combination of several different factors and interests coming into play. So agriculture, local adaptation, climate change, all of these things intersect here and could have some real implications for the future of the species, which then affects us since we are the ones that eat the corn. So for this particular module, thinking about what you'll be able to do by the time you complete this module, you'll be able to, first of all, identify the factors that promote local adaptation or cause it. You'll be able to describe some experiments that people often do in order to figure out if local adaptation is indeed happening. You'll be able to use molecular data. Of course, this is a molecular ecology class. You'll be able to use molecular data to figure out whether certain loci are under selection. You'll be able to assess and justify the types of molecular ecology data that are needed to make informed policy decisions for populations that may be locally adapted. So one of the quizzes we'll do towards the end of this module asks you to think about kind of a broader picture type thing and what types of information you would need to gather to be an informed citizen to make some policy decisions about this. And then just like we have been doing, I'll ask you at the end to choose a paper that could be used to write a proposal about this topic of local adaptation. On that front, here's one example of a paper that I found using the search terms local adaptation and molecular ecology. This is a very recent paper from earlier this year, and what they found was in different species of bumblebees that are found in the montane regions. They were looking at whether these different species and different populations were locally adapted, meaning specifically adapted to live in their unique habitats. And the habitat factors they were looking at in this particular study were related to temperature and precipitation. So that's an example of the type of study you might find when you're looking for papers, and we'll also talk more about, of course, this topic of local adaptation throughout the entire module. And again, why is this all relevant? As we've been talking about, I say this every time, at the end of the semester, we're writing our final proposals. To get there, we're writing 2 quote-unquote mini or practice proposals along the way. And you've already done proposal 1, so that's awesome, check. And then we still have proposal 2 to do. And so in proposal 2, we're going to start building some additional pieces to get to that final proposal. So last time we ended at the introduction and the aims. This time we're going to add on the approach, for instance. We'll have different modules to cover that for us. But again, the idea is that for that particular proposal, you will focus on a topic related to what we've covered in the second half of the course, since this is taking the place of a unit exam. So local adaptation is one of those potential topics for you to focus on for the second proposal. So we'll have you find a paper for that you could build on later if necessary.